I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 100 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Natural Resources, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, November 29, 2022. The committee is resuming its study of Canada's electricity grid and network. Since today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, we'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of all. Before we begin, I would like to ask all members and other in-person participants to consult the cards on the table for guidelines to prevent audio feedback incidents. Please take note of the following preventative measures in place to protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters. Only use a black-approved earpiece. The former gray earpieces must no longer be used. Keep your earpiece away from all microphones at all times. When you're not using your earpiece, please place it face down on the sticker placed on the table for this purpose. Thank you for your cooperation. Zoom reminders, please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Additionally, screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. In accordance with the committee's routine motion concerning connection tests for witnesses, I'm informing the committee that all witnesses have required the connection test in advance of this meeting. Mr. Angus, before I begin, I just want to go to Mr. Angus, and then I'll begin with witnesses. Go ahead, Mr. Angus.
Yes, Chair. Just out of fairness to our witnesses and to my Liberal colleagues who really want to get this study underway, and we were shortchanged because of our technical problems, I'm wondering if it would be fair to have the witnesses speak, and then we do one round of questions so that we're not wasting their time for having waited for us.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. If I don't see any opposition to that, I think we can proceed. And I will suggest maybe opening statements in a round of 5 minutes each. Would that be fine? I do need a couple of minutes at the end of that just for a couple of administrative items for the study that we've adopted. And I'll do that very quickly at the end of the proceedings today. Okay, so let's proceed with that. I would now like to welcome our witnesses with us today. From Energy Storage Canada, Alex Simakoff, Director of External Affairs by video conference. From Everwind Fuels, Trent Vichy, Chief Executive Officer by video conference. And from Water Power Canada, Gilbert Bennett, President. We have up to 5 minutes for opening remarks, and we will begin with yourself in person. Gilbert Bennett from Water Power Canada.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I'm Gilbert Bennett, representing. Thank you to the honourable members for the opportunity to appear before this committee today. Water Power Canada represents Canada's hydropower industry, and hydropower provides 60% of Canada's electricity, with over 82,000 megawatts in service. But electricity is only a piece of the puzzle, as fossil fuels supply 3/4 of the energy consumed by Canadians. Achieving our net zero ambitions by 2050 will require us to double our electricity supply, repeating up the past 100 years of work building the electricity system that we have today in the next 25 years. Hydropower generation offers 3 important benefits to our electricity system. First, long-term storage. Hydropower with facilities with reservoirs provide massive storage capacity over a period of months. Flexible production with the ability to control output as needed, and with pump storage to be able to store surplus energy for use later. And firm output. With water in storage, hydropower facilities can provide reliable and stable power when needed. Canada's electricity system is operated, maintained, and to a significant extent owned by provincial entities. And notwithstanding the federal government's role in aspects of environmental assessment, permitting, and interprovincial transmission, the provinces are constitutionally responsible for electricity generation, transmission, and distribution. Electricity system operators and utilities operate within a provincially regulated framework that addresses reliability, cost recovery, and approval of investments. Except for a limited set of matters under federal jurisdiction, most environmental assessment and permitting responsibilities also lie with provincial authorities. Ultimately, expansion of Canada's electricity system will be approved by provincial electricity regulators, and absent any other source of financial support, costs will be recovered from provincial electricity customers. Each province is responsible for the development of its net zero roadmap. Historically, more transmission capacity exists between Canada and the United States, with less so between Canadian provinces. And the rationale is straightforward. Canadian producers have been able to justify transmission investments so that they can participate in U.S. electricity markets, particularly when peak demands in those markets don't coincide with their own. The business case is not as obvious for east-west trade between provinces, particularly when market structures don't always facilitate real-time trading. But we need to investigate these opportunities on a broader scale. Interconnecting larger areas provides greater diversity of supply for a larger region and provides greater ability for surpluses in one area to offset shortfalls in another. Interconnecting hydropower producing areas with their neighbors extends the reach of hydropower reservoir storage more broadly. Interconnecting areas with high-quality, variable renewables extends their market reach and improves their business case during periods of low demand in their own market. Substantial expansion of our electricity system is required to meet our net zero aspirations, but we're concerned with the challenges for developing projects in Canada. The environmental assessment and permitting process for clean energy projects is long and arduous, and uncertainties created by the Impact Assessment Act, the Fisheries Act, the Migratory Birds Regulations create unnecessary risk. Clear timelines for decision-making do not exist, and prohibitions on necessary activities have been imposed without compliance mechanisms for project developers. Some departments, notably Fisheries and Oceans Canada, have created new compliance risk by creating uncertainty for existing facilities that were permitted decades ago. Federal programs that were meant to encourage investment, such as the Clean Electricity Investment Tax Credits, are unnecessarily complex, have extraneous conditions, and are set to expire before they're useful to developers of long-term projects. Although climate change is an overarching priority for our federal government, processes and programs are not operating with that goal in mind and are focused on their own silos of responsibility. We're hopeful that the commitments made by our federal government regarding regulatory streamlining will achieve their intent. Ultimately, our energy transition will happen when end users, from individuals to industrial customers, decide to change their energy sources from fossil fuel to electricity. Those individual decisions will drive electricity consumption to justify regulatory approvals for generation and transmission projects. Given the extent of provincial jurisdiction and the requirement for end user action, our national government needs to consider itself as a change enabler. Our summary recommendations are: develop support for energy projects nationally. The scope of change expected will require large-scale projects everywhere in Canada. Urgently streamline project approval processes and provide guidance to permitting authorities that energy projects are required to meet our net zero aspirations. Encourage and support regional planning initiatives to unlock the benefits of greater interprovincial transmission interconnection. Support low-cost investments in electric alternatives to fossil fuel use with standards and incentives to encourage switching. And finally, actively work with provinces and municipalities to address barriers to electrification and facilitate the change to our net zero future. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to present before the committee, and I would be pleased to address any questions the committee may have at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. And I should have said this at the beginning. I do use these cards. Yellow is 30-second warning. Red is time's up. And I will try to let you complete your sentence before cutting you off, but I will try to show this. We'll next go online from Energy Storage Canada to Mr. Alex Simakov. You have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. Thank you, members of the committee, for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Alex Simakov. I'm the Director of External Affairs for Energy Storage Canada. We are the national voice of the energy storage and smart grid technology sectors, representing over 97 members from across the country, a number that has roughly doubled in the past 4 years. I want to make the case today that energy storage technologies have made a tremendous progress over the past generation. First, we're really good at making friends with other technologies. With nuclear generators, we're being co-located to reduce nuclear maneuvering and optimize their output. With gas plants, we're optimizing response times, where batteries take a millisecond. It allows gas plants to fire up at a more gradual pace to respond to needs. Our biggest customers are large industrials who put us behind the meter to manage their peak demands and reduce costs for both themselves and the system overall. We're also, of course, strongly paired with intermittent renewables so that when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow, we have firm capacity that we can provide for our system. I want to take a second to focus on Ontario to describe some of the key progress that we made very recently. Last month, the Independent Electricity System Operator announced the results of the LT1 RFP, which is about 2 gigawatts, aiming for 2.5 gigawatts of capacity. Clean energy storage secured 10 of those projects, and I want to leave you with 3 figures here. The first is 24. Our costs dropped 24% year-on-year decrease. 2 is 40%. That is the cost at which energy storage projects came in compared to the natural gas projects on average megawatt per business day. And 3 is 90%. 9 of the 10 clean energy projects had First Nations equity participation of 50% or greater. All that means collectively is that today, the energy storage represents the cheapest form of new capacity in the system, period. It also means that Ontario, having completed its procurement, is on track to be the 3rd largest jurisdiction for clean energy storage in North America. I want to reiterate Mr. Bennett's points that our focus overall is on the doubling of Canada's national energy grid. That is the most consequential economic development opportunity of our lifetime, and one that our sector is committed to fully. While it's led absolutely provincially and great progress is being made there are major roles for the federal government to undertake in this regard as well. The first is ensuring sufficient capacity, transmission capacity. That is the existential choke point that is affecting all decarbonizing and electrifying economies. In the UK, they're spending about £1 billion per year on wasted wind electricity because they cannot get that power from Scotland to England. In the US, some markets, you're taking about a decade to get a new connection because of the constraints. If we're looking for an investment case, it's certainly that. The choke point that we are going to see on continued economic growth in Canada will be our ability to distribute and consume electricity because of a distribution and transmission system that cannot keep pace with electrification and renewables build out. 2 steps can be taken here. The first is tax incentives for municipalities that welcome development. We've had, as energy storage, an community welcoming us, and they are eager, part reticent, and we respect that reticence and are happy to work with those who are eager to work with us. That said, as we move forward and as the intensity of and the frequency of clean grid assets connections continue, we are going to need to make sure that we are providing appropriate incentives for those communities that do step up and want to do the work. And I don't just mean just one-off cash transfers. I mean, we need to have systematic tax incentives for the municipalities that are keen to do that work, and make sure that we have incentives for those that are reticent or reluctant to invest in new clean energy technologies. Likewise, to echo Mr. Bennett's points, interprovincial interties are going to be critical. Historically, our provincial energy regulators and planners have looked southwards to export power to the states. We now have a great opportunity to incentivize them to build interties between provinces, not just to balance out the diversity of our demand profiles, but more consequentially, the diversity of our supply profiles. The third point is on ambitions and aspirations to phase out natural gas generation by 2035. Speaking as the representative of the sector that will be the foremost beneficiary of that change, I urge extreme caution on moving with prejudice on achieving a goal that is fairly arbitrarily set and is not aligned with system needs. To quote the ISO, that goal is unachievable in Ontario by 2035 without putting at risk the reliability of the electricity system, electrification of the broader economy, and economic growth. We're on a rapid track to exceed decarbonization, and we want to make sure that those gas plants are being used as little as possible, shrinking them to only the extreme days, but we absolutely need them for emergency and standby resources at a time when we're anticipating extreme hot weather events and other challenges coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your opening statement. We'll now go to Trent Vichy, Chief Executive Officer from Everwind Fuels. Mr. Vichy, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Chair and honourable members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to present today. My name is Trent Vichy, the founder and CEO of Everwind Fuels Company, Canada's most advanced green hydrogen development. Our projects in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and Labrador are supported by a world-class renewables resource alongside our First Nation partners. Canada's East Coast has exceptional wind, and it's a resource that we should take advantage of. In recent years, the urgency to get off coal and other fossil fuels and green the grid has been building. For example, in Nova Scotia, the province is committed to ending the use of coal by 2030 and using at least 80% renewable energy by the end of the decade. Green hydrogen production and its use is crucial to meeting those targets. In fact, Nova Scotia's Green Hydrogen Action Plan explicitly named as a quote, "It's a complementary option to help strengthen the electricity system." This industry can be a flexible demand user, which complements renewable power as well as hydro in the overall mix. This is precisely what our green hydrogen projects will help do, not to mention the thousands of jobs and billions of dollars of economic activity they'll generate. We're working with provincial governments right now to secure an agreement that will start greening the grid in Nova Scotia, and we are working hard in Newfoundland to develop a very large project there. However, like all these nascent industries, standing them up requires support at all levels of government. Across the board, the energy transition needs support for investment in battery plants, transmission, which the former speakers have talked about. We echo that comment, and flexible power uses and green hydrogen. This is why programs like NRCan's Smart Renewables Electrification Program need to consider how green hydrogen is helping get off coal and reaching shared federally and provincial goals to secure a renewable future. We ask the parliamentarians and officials alike ensure that these programs are created with the flexibility required to actually hit the targets that we've set to banish coal to the dustbin of history. We must be swift, decisive and flexible in our public policy actions. The global race to provide clean energy to the world is on and competition is fierce. It's critical that the federal government to determine whether Canada will be a leader or a follower in this industry. To reiterate my earlier points, I offer 3 recommendations. Allow for programs like SREP to have the flexibility to support green hydrogen. Building out the supply chains and infrastructure required for the energy transition is going to be a monumental task. Canada needs to encourage the support of manufacturing these essential items. These are items like transmission breakers and switching equipment, which have been an increasing problem. Canada could stand up manufacturing in this sector. Governments need to take a broad view of electrification to support greening of the grid and decarbonising hard to electrify industries. In conclusion, I'd say that there's no getting off coal and other fossil fuels without investing in transmission and supporting flexible users like green hydrogen. Transmission is essential for decarbonisation. Wind power, hydro, and even solar are complementary, but transmission is needed. This is something that Canada needs to grab with force. Clean power is an economic opportunity for Canada. The work that ourselves and others are doing in this industry is going to drive a lot of economic growth if it's supported. This is Canada's moment, and we must seize the opportunity. And I want to thank you for your time today. Merci beaucoup. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Vichy, for your opening remarks. We'll now proceed to our first round of questions, and we will begin, and this is for 5 minutes each, colleagues. We will begin with Mr. Patzer from the Conservative Party of Canada. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to start with Mr. Bennett in the room here. In order to hit net zero on the grid by 2035, do you know how many hydroelectric dams it would take to replace all of the natural gas power, but also to expand the grid to be able to meet all this new demand that the government talks about? Do you know what that number is?
I don't have it off the top of my head. That's a number I can report back to the committee on, though.
Have you done the research on it already?
We have not investigated every market in Canada. We certainly acknowledge that there are markets in Canada that don't have great hydro potential, but I would say at the outset that we are 10 years away from that goal. The development of any hydro project, including the environmental assessment and construction process, would take us beyond 2035.
What year do you think we'd be able to do that? If realistically, with the existing timelines and processes in place, at what point do you think we could build enough hydro dams in order to meet that demand?
Somebody said, go tomorrow. We're in a 6 to 7 year environmental assessment process and probably a 10-year planning and construction process. So we would be 2040, best case.
Okay, thank you very much. To Everwind Fuels, similar question to you. If we were to hit net zero electricity generation by 2035, how many wind turbines would have to be built in order to hit that target? Do you have that number?
I don't. We're looking at building and supplying green hydrogen, so it's a specialized industry, so I don't have a view across the entire country.
Okay, so how many hydrogen units then would you have to build in order to hit net zero by 2035?
I don't have those figures right off the top of my head. We can come back to you on that.
Have you done the research into that yet?
We've been focused on like our own business case, which is focusing on Eastern Canada.
Okay, and I forget the name, which Mr. Simikoff. Okay, there we go. How many gigawatts of battery storage capacity would be needed for 2035 to be net zero on the grid?
Mm-hmm. If we could speak to Ontario in particular, right now we have 10.5 gigawatts of gas. We've contracted for 3 gigawatts of storage. So to increase that, we need about another 8. You might want to say 10 just for additional comfort. So about 10 gigawatts, that's about threefold what we've contracted. I think the critical point to stress as well that if we do decarbonize all that gas with storage, that just gets us to the status quo of how much capacity we have. That's no additional capacity for electrifying transit, no additional capacity for electrifying homes. So I think that the key point and the one you're getting across is that we do need both, and we should scale storage as quickly as possible and have gas as a standby and emergency resource for when we need it.
Okay. How long would it take to actually build that kind of capacity? I know you only referenced Ontario, but what would it take to actually build the kind of capacity to hit what the government is suggesting needs to be done?
We could take a straightforward storage project from go. It would take about 2 years to complete reliably and comfortably. That's the current quantum. The largest project right now in Ontario is contracted 400 megawatts. At that point, we have a bit more flexibility compared to some of the other speakers in terms of location, so we can put them everywhere. If we had a warlike effort to devote all the resources in the province to doing so, I think we could probably do it in maybe about a decade above all other priorities.
How much per kilowatt hour would it cost to do that? Like, would there be increases?
So I think we want to be clear as well. When we talk about new capacity right now, storage is the cheapest at $682 a megawatt business day, but that's not cheaper than an existing asset that's already built and paid for. So certainly we're not going to get economies of an asset that's been fully capitalized. That's just realistically not how any market or any energy resource would work.
Okay, so there'll be substantive costs still to come. Mr. Bennett, your organization put out a paper saying that, I'll quote, while Canada has the potential to have a clean, modern net zero economy, it is incumbent on the Government of Canada to communicate the trade-offs to be made to achieve our net zero aspirations. Achievement of this goal will come at a cost in terms of energy rates, equipment investment, and energy development. Tell us more about the terms of energy rates, please. What would that look like?
So the impact on energy rates from a substantial investment in new equipment and new technology is, in our view, is going to have an impact that needs to be looked at very carefully. So you're looking at assets that have been amortized over decades. And as I said in my remarks, we're talking about replacing that entire infrastructure over again in the next 25 years. So we have not done rates analysis, but it's reasonable to conclude that there will be upward pressure on rates when you spend $1.5 to $2 trillion on new electricity infrastructure for our country.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to Mr. Majid Jawari from the Liberal Party of Canada. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to all our witnesses, and thank you for your testimony. I'm going to start with Mr. Simokov from Energy Storage Canada. You're rhyming up three numbers very quickly, and I did try my best to write them down. You talked about the 24%, 40%, and 90%. Can you quickly highlight what those numbers are? Again, my apology, I wasn't as fast, but I would like to get a reminder of what those numbers are.
The three numbers are 24%, so cost per megawatt business day from last year's procurements to this year's decreased by 24%, so they're 24% cheaper. The second figure was 40%. The 1,782 megawatts of clean energy storage that were procured came in at $672 per megawatt business day. That is 40% of the cost of the gas assets they came on. Those gas assets were 411 megawatts of natural gas and biogas generation that averaged $1,681 per megawatt business day. And then the last figure was 90% of the 10 clean energy storage projects. 9 of them accounted or featured First Nations equity of at least 50%, and many more than that.
Thank you for that. And as a result of that, you said we're going to have the energy storage is going to be the cheapest method of actually generating electricity, or not generating, actually the cheapest way of electricity. And then you talked about Ontario being the third largest in North America as far as a jurisdiction who's going to be leading the storage. Is that true?
So 2 points. We are the cheapest new capacity. To stress, we are not cheaper than existing capacity assets. In terms of, but yes, we are the new cheapest if you'd like to build any new additional capacity. As far as other jurisdictions, Texas is the leading and California is second. Ontario will be third once this procurement is built.
You talked about sufficient, enablers would be sufficient transmission capacity, tax incentive, interprovincial, interties, as well as, balancing the phase out of the gas plant. But I'd like to get your input around regulations of the energy storage. According to the Canadian Renewable Energy Association, most jurisdictions in Canada lack a clearly defined legislative and regulatory context to guide the participation of energy storage in the electricity system. This barrier can prevent these jurisdictions from taking full advantage of the energy storage solution in a timely manner to advance the energy transition. What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you. That's accurate. We'd like to point out two things. So historically, we've had either generation assets or loads, consumers. Energy storage is a bidirectional resource, can do both, and needs regulatory reforms. I'd like to recognize Ontario and most recently the province of Alberta, which under Minister Neudorf recognized energy storage resources as a distinct resource class. That's been a major improvement and will be an essential ingredient for the restructured electricity market consultations currently underway for Alberta. Those two provinces are at the forefront. Other provinces, I do need to effect some regulatory reforms to fully recognize the capacity of bidirectional energy resources.
Okay, with about a minute to go, you talked about jurisdiction that they're leading on that. Can you talk about like one or two recommendations that you have around regulation that would, complement the tax incentives and interprovincial, interties to be able to expedite, storage of this
from the federal government?
Yeah.
From the federal government, I would suggest that for a large infrastructure projects, for example, the long-duration energy storage, one way to maximize bids and competitive pressures is to allow a stipend for qualified bidders who put forward a viable project but aren't successful. For example, Ontario will be leading a long-duration energy storage procurement next year. It's only the third in the world. It's very expensive to put together a bid and to compete. Not everyone is going to win, but if they know that there's going to be at least a coverage of their costs put forward, Ontario will see a lot more competition come forward and ultimately see lower rates for ratepayers. At the moment, there isn't a provincial mechanism to finance this. If the federal government were to step in and cover a portion of those costs, and we're talking in the tens of thousands of dollars, we could see savings in the many millions through increased competition and global pressures.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jawari. We'll now go to Monsieur Simard for 5 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you very much, George. Mr. Bennett, can you hear the interpretation? You have to select the right language. English. Interpretation. You can hear me now? Excellent. Now, we won't have much time, so perhaps I can ask you questions, and then you can always provide written responses if necessary. Now, I am going to confess my ignorance here. Besides the Hydro-Quebec's capacity, I'm not very familiar with the various hydroelectric actors outside Quebec. Could you provide the committee with the number of existing hydroelectric projects outside Quebec, as well as those that are being developed?
Provide that.
Excellent. Merci.
Excellent. Thank you very much. In your opening remarks, the last recommendation that you said we had to work to reduce barriers to electrification. Could you give us a few examples of what those barriers are?
So some examples that come to mind are local building codes, standards for electric equipment. So, for example, in Ontario, most recently, there's been a debate about whether the electricity service for new residential construction should be able to accommodate an electric house instead of a natural gas heated house. We would say it's cost effective to make sure that new building stock is built to be electrified. Providing, a service to the garage for an electric vehicle down the road. It's much easier to do that with a new house than it is to call an electrician and come back and do it later. So we think there are cost-effective approaches that could be used, and those happen at the provincial in building codes and the municipal level in terms of bylaws. Municipalities that have made decisions to limit the growth of natural gas for new residential construction are helping to facilitate an electric future. So we would support that. Anytime that there's an opportunity to use more electricity, we think that's a good thing.
Merci. Merci.
Thank you. If you have any other examples, perhaps you could send those to us in writing as well. That is to say, any measures that could reduce barriers to electrification. Mr. Bennett, Hydro-Quebec recently announced that it wants to invest $100 billion between now and 2035, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So tax credits for clean energy that were in the latest budget were quite timely. However, something was bothering me about that. That is to say that there are several criteria. For example, there are rules, labor rules, rules about the labor that can be used. And there will also be criteria about the money that will be saved being returned to consumers. But this is almost impossible with Hydro-Quebec. We won't necessarily know which atom of electricity came from where. So I don't know quite how they'll do that. And also, rates are regulated by our regulator in Quebec. So does your association think that those factors or criteria are flexible enough?
No, we don't. We think they're overly restrictive, and the rules and limitations on what should be an incentive, we believe are unnecessary. If our federal policy is to promote investment in electrical infrastructure, whether it's generation or transmission or smart distribution systems, then those should be structured as an incentive. We find that there is a addition of unnecessary conditions that ultimately slow investment down, slow projects down, and we think that is not helpful if we're to achieve this goal rapidly.
Merci. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. So perhaps I could ask a quick question for all our witnesses. Please answer yes or no. If we want to be moving towards more electrification and developing this clean energy stream, do you think that a carbon price is necessary, rather a carbon tariff? So let's start with you, Mr. Bennett.
Our policy is that a price on carbon is a good means of facilitating a migration to renewables. And a policy decision can be taken on what to do with the revenue, but we think that imposing a price on carbon changes the balance from fossil fuel to renewables in our economy.
Merci.
Thank you. I'd have the same question for our other witnesses.
If I'd like to go next, I would like to distinguish between a carbon price for household consumers, which I don't believe in any meaningful way directs them towards decarbonization, versus a carbon price for large industrials and system operators who do have extensive planning and long-term investment views, and they can properly make decisions that can contribute to long-term diversification. So household and consumer goods, no. Large industrials, yes.
Merci.
Thank you.
On avait un autre témoin? No?
Was there another witness? No?
Thank you. I'm now going to go to Mr. Angus from the NDP for 5 minutes. Mr. Angus, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, we have a huge oil and gas and nuclear lobby, and we're often told how difficult it is to make things happen and how regulations and everything's standing in the way. California went from 770 megawatts in battery capacity to 10,379 megawatts in a period of 5 years. And that allows them now that on 40 out of 48 days, they're running pretty much straight on renewables, and they can go to natural gas or whatever else on the backups. But that battery capacity has been revolutionary. It's been even more revolutionary in Texas. Mr. Simikoff, what is the potential in Ontario? We see that they're talking about, I think, 1,784 megawatts from 10 projects coming online by 2028, but that's still like 1/10 of what California has done in 6 years. How much more capacity can we get online, and how will that change it, not just for going to clean energy, but for consumers and the price that they're paying for household energy and for industrial operations?
Thank you, Mr. Angus. I would appreciate California has been a great leader in this, and their storage resources are backed up by extensive thermal resources, which represent 45% of the grid's capacity, which has been essential to ensure, and not always, the reliability of the California grid. And that resource will continue to be invaluable for at least the next, well past 2035. For Ontario, we see the capacity for energy storage to completely exceed all thermal resources, certainly well before 2050. There is a great variety as to where between 2035 and 2050 energy storage resources can fully displace natural gas. At this point, we envision the goal for 2050 to be 88,000 megawatts of capacity. That's more than doubling where we are today. Energy storage will have to fulfill close to the entirety of that, notwithstanding existing hydroelectric and nuclear resources, to ensure that we have a reliable grid.
Thank you. I mean, the prices on the various energies, they're different depending on the project and that. But, you know, the bottom line, what we've heard from testimony is the bottom line on solar now is $24 a megawatt, wind about $24. Nuclear, their bottom line is $141 per megawatt, natural gas at $39 per megawatt. Now, when you began your testimony, you'd said, were you coming in 40% of the cost compared to natural gas? Did I hear you right, and can you explain that?
Yes, the cost of new, in the LT1 procurement from the ISO results released May 9th, the 10 energy storage projects came in at an average cost of $672. The average cost for the 411 megawatts of gas was $1,681. So we are just below 40% of the new bids that were put forward. Again, that is obviously a limited context, and I don't want to over-extrapolate on that, but from the last competitive tender in Canada, we were the cheapest new resource.
Well, that's very important because one of the questions that we always hear about solar and wind is, the flexibility because it's not always running at peak capacity. But if we could store that and at the cost that it's being delivered at, it would be very, very, very beneficial, not just for the clean energy sector, but for the bottom line for consumers. I'm going to have to switch to Mr. Vichy now, and I'm very interested in green hydrogen. But the need to get these projects up to speed, it's not just that we're dealing with a climate crisis, but our competitors in the United States are moving on the U.S. seaboard at an extraordinary rate with projects getting off the ground that are going to be producing offshore wind for hundreds of thousands of homes. Are you concerned that we're going to get swamped because when they have to dump their excess capacity, wouldn't Nova Scotia be a natural place for them to dump excess capacity and maybe make some of our projects a little less viable?
No, I think it's the other way. It's the other way around in that there's actually, if you look at the map of U.S. generation, it's they have a lot of decarbonisation work to do. And in fact, if you could get offshore wind in Nova Scotia, which is some of the best in the world, into the US market, it's probably, there is clearly an opportunity there.
Okay,
and the green hydrogen.
Here, so I'm going to jump right on you. How important is it to get these ITCs up and running so that we can make critical? You can lose your mind on this. We've been pushing this government. Where are these ITCs? How important is it that we get them on the table now?
It is absolutely critical because getting started first and early is paramount. Other parts of the world, not just the US, are moving on this, the Middle East and other places in the world. It is absolutely critical.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. Mr. Vichy, if I may, I just have a quick question. I was in Taiwan, in the Taiwan Strait. Northland Power, a Canadian company, is investing $9 billion in another pension fund as well. What's the opportunity on Canada's East Coast for wind power from an investment perspective? That's your projects plus all the other projects you think that might come forward in the future.
Yeah, there's two different parts to that question. Firstly, offshore wind there's like 100 gigawatts of potential resource, in under 50 meters. So you could do fixed bottom. You need transmission though. You absolutely need transmission, and it's a really good complement with some of Quebec's hydro resources and also pushing into other markets there. On the hydrogen side, I'll talk about the first phase of our project has $2 billion of economic benefit associated with it. About half of that is in Nova Scotia, half of it federally. So we're talking about a game changer here.
Thank you. Thank you to all the witnesses. You can submit briefs to the committee clerk if there's anything you may have missed or if anything else you'd like to provide to the attention of the committee for this important study. To the witnesses you are released, thank you once again. For colleagues, I have just a few items to discuss with you before we conclude today's meeting. The first one is on suggested witness lists in relation to the study of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. Is Thursday end of day a deadline that we can all accept so we can move forward with the study and get witnesses? I don't see any objections. Thursday end of day? Thursday end of day it is. Thank you, colleagues. Also, is it the will of the committee that in relation to the study of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, the proposed budget in the amount of $32,100 be adopted? It is. I see no objections. Great. Thank you very much. I wish everybody a great day. That concludes our meeting. Meeting adjourned.
you.